Isaiah.
Hey, Frank.
How are you?
I'm good. I am feeling more like myself today, which is good.
So, listeners and viewers, we're with Coach Isaiah here today, and he is fresh off of the Unbound gravel less than 48 hours ago. He's back at work,
Yep.
and he is here to give us his race recap, more or less. Yeah, how was it?
It was a wild day. It was I mean, the event, I think everyone's been saying this, but the event, it is worth all the hype. It's worth all the energy around it and why people are so enraptured by it. It's definitely a very hard day on the bike. And I give so much credit to everyone that was out there. I mean, that's like always the really cool thing about gravel races and kind of like these mass start events, that you just have all walks of life, and it's amazing. And the start line is like, yeah, you never know who you'll be next to. And it was pretty amazing to see who finished and who did it and what time they did it. And yeah, it just, it's all pretty cool. It gives you a better reference point of like people's spirit and what they can push through. So it's pretty sweet to see.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So tell us about your day. What time did you get up?
Yeah.
What did you eat for beforehand? What did you eat the night before?
Yeah.
What did you eat on the bike? Tires pressure. Tell us. We're curious.
Give the details. So the start time is an interesting thing to start. So I, like a week, actually probably a month prior, I started waking up at like 5 o'clock to start work.
Wow.
And I did that to try and like train myself to wake up. Unbound starts at 6. It starts at 6 a.m. on the dime. And I am notoriously a really bad early racer normally. I kind of struggle. I've always struggled at that. I guess that's coming from like the roadie background where you race at 10 and it's super easy wake up times and all that. But basically, so I tried my best to kind of prep myself and my gut to get going early so I could, do my business and hit the start line. It worked out pretty well on the race day, but it was also one of those days where you wake up and your body's like, oh man, I really don't want to be eating anything. Like my stomach was kind of queasy, which I knew was not going to be a good start. So breakfast prep wasn't ideal. So, always more work to be done in that regard. But it was, yeah, I mean, like the race started early and the staging was super easy. I forget how many people started, but I think there was like at least 1,500 people in the 200, I think, maybe more. And then, other events like the 100 started, I think 30 minutes after the 200. So it was a lot of people. And it was, pretty just amazing to see. And people were pumped to be out there, and it was great. Let's see. So the race started out, and it was just kind of like a classic dynamic of what happens when you stick, as I mentioned, all walks of life in the same dynamic. And the rollout for Unbound is, I would say, because you do it again coming back, it's the easiest part of the course by a lot. So it's pretty fast, and you don't hit pretty decent gravel for a little bit. So it's a road rollout, and then you hit the gravel. And then pretty much right away, everyone is like flats were starting. I would say there was a flat, like somebody was pulling over for a flat tire every 5 minutes, maybe more. And that's just because you're literally just trusting where you're at. There's no looking, right? There's no looking to see if you're about to plow into something. You have no idea. So then as a result, anyone who was kind of like really racing to be at the front was pegging stuff and then getting punctures as a result. And we're also going pretty quick at this point. So it was just pretty chaotic. And then I would say flat filled at the start. And then all of a sudden it just started, as you might expect, there was a decent amount of crashes on the way out of town. And there was some good ones. You have a lot of, again, back to my recurring theme of just varying abilities and experience levels. So for example, crash happening in front of you, maybe 5 riders back, people crashing when just because of their reaction to said crash, not necessarily because they were in danger. So it's different experience levels, and how they reacted to it made it a little bit more hectic. I think I was talking with Allison Tetrick in the middle of on the rollout, and we were both like, yeah, this reminds me of like a really rowdy road start. And yeah, so it was just hectic and crazy. And that kind of pursued for maybe like 22 miles or so, where we hit the pinch point, and everyone knew this was going to be kind of the crux, because it was the first technical bit of the course. And basically it was like this rutted, kind of chunky descent. And I say chunky, I've been getting a lot of questions on like what the course was kind of like. And it's a hard course. It's a tough course. A lot of it, you're actually on like, I guess what was called like B grade roads, where it's not really, they're not maintained at all. And there are just like big chunks of gravel that have just been laid down out there, that, you know, is just, it is what it is, and it'll be what it'll be on the day. And it goes from pretty deep gravel with pretty large chunks of gravel. I would say like softball, golf ball sized gravel. And then there'll be like random slates of just rock that are the things that tend to slice the tires, which everyone kind of like is afraid of with Unbound. And so it's kind of a mixture of that. And then there was some decent rutted sections, and then there was some decent sections that had no gravel at all, and just like there was just grass everywhere, and you just kind of like had to pick a rut and go for it. So it made for a good venture. There was never like a section of like, you know, double track or single track with, you know, rock gardens or anything like that. So it was always something that you were able to be in control for the most part. But what made it tricky was the fact that, one, it was over 200 miles of it, and two, you're trying to ride a pack dynamic. So in this pinch point early on, you've got, I don't know, 500 riders probably at that point sending it into one pinch point section. So there was, of course, crashes and then splits and all this other things that kind of occurred. And I think that's actually where pretty big crash happened at the front of the race, where like a couple of guys went down, and I think that's where Quinn went down and abandoned the race. So it was a pretty big pinch point. And that's just all in the first, 25 miles of a 206 mile race. So it was a pretty wild start, which you kind of expect. And then from there, it just kind of boomed and blew up. And you were either lucky to find yourself in a great group, or you weren't. I kind of took like an apprehensive approach to this whole day, just because I've taken a different standpoint in my life since retiring from pro cycling. So I took this as an adventure and not necessarily something to be at the pointy end. And as a result, I found myself solo after this junction point, and I was solo pretty much for the rest of the day until the final aid station, where I linked up with two other guys and managed to work with them. But a huge thing we're talking about before we started recording is like the headwind was horrible. And it was just horrible. It was pretty much once you hit that first aid station and you roll out from there, it was just awful. And I think that was something people who were solo were fighting against a lot of the day, just because you had no reprieve. And when I linked up with the two riders in the final, after the final aid, that helped a ton. It just made the experience just better. So anyways, good rule for future racers is like sometimes fighting a little bit more in the beginning can actually land you in a better spot for the rest of the race. And I kind of knew that, and I embraced that, but like, it might not seem super great to fight early, but sometimes if that lands you in a pretty strong group that actually knows how to work together, it can mean a lot for the next, 10 hours. So
such a long time. So your finishing time was, tell the listeners what was your time again?
So
I'm looking at your Training Peaks file.
Yeah. So my like ride time was under 13, but that like isn't including the stoppage time as well. So
you're using like auto pause.
Yeah. So I beat the sun. That was like my main goal,
There you go.
which is, I think, like a big goal by a lot of people when they do this. But yeah, I mean, I think I had an hour and a half of stoppage time. So it was sizable. It was a good
Yeah.
chunk.
It looks like you did 44 minutes at the what was that, the 150
Yep.
stop? Yeah.
Yeah, that was the final aid yeah.
And
I took
so,
my time.
like, describe how you felt coming into that, and what did you do for those 44 minutes?
So the feed zones are actually, like, the aid zones are pretty hectic. Because as we talked about, there's, I don't know, 2,000 people doing this event. So you have essentially the aid stations are a town. And through the town, they basically make it into one long feed zone. And you have a color that you're assigned, and your feeder or your crew goes to that color. And then that's how you find them during the race itself. So I went to, the far end. That was where my feeder was. For the first feed, it was pretty easy going because that was only 70 miles in. So it was just kind of like restock, refuel. And then, but the problem is for after the first feed, there is, 100 and something miles until your next crew feed. And then there's water stops in the middle of that. So you have to carry all of your food with you. So anything nutrition wise you have to have with you. Water you can refill on. So that made the first one like pretty pivotal. And then I actually, like, from still having my stomach be upset, I had to actually backtrack on the course and find their bathrooms. So that was a whole nother thing. But yeah, I didn't, a lot of the pro guys are, having multiple hydration packs, like trading them out, making sure they have everything laid out. And I like stopped, didn't really worry too much about it. Kind of took my time, talked to a couple of people, and then left. So different strategies for different people and folks. But then hydration stop in the middle, which is like their water oasis. That was essentially just them being out there with water. Stopped there for a good bit. And then the final aid was at 150. I kind of needed that recoup, honestly, at that point. I was pretty dead. I think it was 155 miles in. So you have like exactly 50 miles to go. And the middle stretch, those 100 plus miles, are by far the hardest part of the course.
Yeah.
It's the most open. It's the most rugged roads. It's the most climbing. It was just a beat down. Like it really was. It was definitely the worst part of the gravel. So yeah, the reprieve was needed. Could I have kept going? Sure. But that wasn't my purpose of being out there. But anyways, when I got there, that was something where it was kind of like, all right, I had a puncture. I had a rear puncture. So my crew like checked to make sure that my pressure was good, because it actually had sealed, which was nice. They just ran through my bike real quick, relieved my chain, wiped it off, clean my glasses. It's little things that really add up. Food, I had a Coke. I had, at that point, I was having issues with basically the whole day. I was having issues getting food down. So I just tried to nibble on things. And that's essentially what took me so long. It took me 45 minutes to get through a PB&J sandwich. That's how hard it was for me to eat at that point. So it was just a combination of my stomach being upset from the beginning of the day, and then also just, not being able to keep your mouth dry. And yeah, so that's, sorry.
Well, what tires and PSI and sealant and setup were you running?
Yeah. Equipment wise, I was on a Zip gravel tire. I was on a Zip 40 gravel tire. I think it's called Tangente, I believe, which is I was actually pretty satisfied with the tire. It rolled really well. I had no issues at all. Good tread pattern. I was running 35 front and rear, and that was actually totally fine all day. I maybe could have gone a little less in the front, but I did pretty well on all the descents and was pretty comfortable with the possibility of flatting. So worked pretty well. But yeah, I mean, I would definitely recommend that. I have a 2x system on my bike, a pretty wide gearing range. And I was maxed on a lot of these climbs. They're actually pretty darn steep.
Yeah.
A lot of these, it was rugged and steep. So they're tough. There's plenty of walking.
I read quite a few post-activity comments from athletes today that did have the one by and saying they ran out of gears on the up and the down.
Yeah.
And so it's interesting. I mean, there was like 12,000 feet of climbing in your file.
Yep.
That's quite a lot. I don't think many people realize that, or, I mean, you'd think Kansas flat,
right?
But it's far from it.
No, I mean, that's what I was so astounded by, is because you kind of, coming from Colorado, you're driving through the flat plains that are kind of ugly and dead. And then you arrive in this place that the Flint Hills are amazing. It's like they're rolling. And when we were there this year, they were super green. And then the Flint Hills are just white. And it's just really iconic and actually really gorgeous and very good gravel riding. So I would recommend at least a visit for sure. But yeah, it was tough. It made it hard. That's for sure.
Yeah. So what did you eat on the bike during, like when you were rolling? Tell us about like how much you ate, at what frequency, for the listeners that want to do this next year.
Yeah. So I was thinking about this earlier. I did, I believe I drank 6 liters of water on the bike.
Okay. 6 liters.
Which is,
how many water bottles is that?
It's a lot.
Yeah.
It's a lot. I think that's like, I'd be guessing, but I'm guessing like 15 or so in that range. Maybe a little bit more. But then I tried to drink liquid calories. But again, with the stomach issues in the beginning, that I actually stopped doing that, and that helped a lot. When you transition into water, I found it's just a little bit nicer on your gut. It just lets you kind of feel replenished a little bit more. And the heat was pretty darn bad. It was an average, looks like my file says an average of 80, high of 100. And during the bulk of it, it was definitely above 90. It's only the beginning that it was
59 degrees at the start, but
right.
It was over 90 for the middle hard part. Yeah.
Yep. And that was the exposed part.
Yeah.
So the heat was a big factor. You could tell that was playing its part big time. And it definitely played into me, just because I couldn't really, made it hard to eat. I think I had posted like a picture of all the different goo items that I needed to eat throughout the entire race.
Saw that.
I ate all of it.
Wow.
It's all gone. So it was, man, I don't remember how many that is exactly, but it was basically, I think I want to say 12 gels and probably, I want to say like 12 chew blocks, like chew sleeves. And then I had some PB&J sandwiches there as well, some like brownies, some like just random stuff that you eat at the feed zones. But I had planned to eat more solid foods, but again, with like the dryness and between the dirt coming off of the gravel and then obviously like the heat, it was very difficult to eat something substantial. So that resulted in me relying even more on the goo food.
So go to Isaiah's Instagram page, because he posted a picture of all the goo energy that he was planning on eating, and it sounds like you did eat. That's quite a lot. Yeah. And then, well, how did you get, like, where did you come by 6 liters of water or drink mix? I mean, what was the strategy there? Like, was that swapping out hydration packs? And just describe that for everyone.
Yeah. So I kind of planned it based off the spacings of the feed zones. And it worked out really well. I have an athlete that kind of struggled with a little bit of being dehydrated because he kind of he passed up the first neutral water zone and went for the second. I hit the first and skipped the second. So I had more during the hottest time. It was more of the luck of the draw of that one. But essentially, I had half of my hydration pack for the first stint, and then had a full. So once I got to the first aid station, I filled everything I possibly could. I had 2 bottles that actually have a liter themselves. They're massive.
Those tall boy.
The tall boy bottle. So I had 2 of those, and then I had 2.5 on my back.
Okay.
So pretty decent amount of water. I was actually amazed at how many people only had like 3 bottles on their bike.
Yeah.
And I'm, curious, but either way, I filled up everything at aid station 1 and drank it all by aid station, by the water station. So
Mm-hmm.
I think like so if you think about that, that was 4.5 liters of water that I drank in 2.5 hours, because of how hot it was. And then that gave me another 4.5 liters for a 4-hour stretch, after that point. So
Okay.
yeah, that was key. And that saved me big time. And then I didn't need all the water going into the finish with only 50 miles to go, but I wanted that comfort, I suppose, after being like
Yeah.
dry, because I was out of water when I got to the second aid.
Mm-hmm.
So
Wow. So tons of water and tons of food.
yeah.
I was talking to Jackson before he raced, and we were reminiscing about the tortoise and the hare and how the
Yeah.
tortoise always beats the hare. And he said, well, I'm going to be a well-fed tortoise.
Nice. Well
So
said. Well said.
yeah, I think that's the key for a lot of riders. Well, so any other like final anecdotes you want to share with everyone? Like now that you have done the race, I mean, everyone's heard so much about it. What's like one thing you could share with all the athletes out there that you didn't know going into, but now you've experienced it firsthand and you can share with everyone?
Man.
Sorry to load that on you.
No, it's on the spot. It's good. I think
Yeah.
if I had to, I was thinking about that today. Like if I had to do it again,
Mm-hmm.
which it's definitely it's
Too
too
early.
soon. It's too early.
Yeah.
It's like right after
Yeah.
you get a tattoo
Yeah.
that you're like, eh. But if I had to do it again, I would definitely, I guess I would start with have more variety and expect kind of like the unexpected. So
Mm-hmm.
one, I got really lucky, and part of it's luck, but I got really lucky and didn't have any mechanicals. But I had everything I needed ready if I needed it. So kind of like expect different variables. So if you can get out on the course beforehand and figure out what it's like, that helps.
Mm-hmm.
For me though, I could have done a better job expecting to need different style of food. So honestly, like I've never needed this, but if I would have had some sort of like smoothie or something along those lines out there, I would have been able to eat a lot more, and I probably would have been able to get more sufficient calories in. What that would have been made of is different, but like that is something. For example, a lot of the foods that I had were very calorically dense, and as a result were dense to eat, so they were very difficult to get down. And when you're 12 hours into a race, forcing yourself to eat what you've been eating for 12 hours is not that fun. So I had a lot of people message me when I put down what I was going to be eating. Like, that's a lot of energy food. And I'm just like,
Right.
yeah, it is. But so I would have liked to have had more variety within liquid real food. But again, never needed that. And who knew? So that's a possibility. But I also think the biggest thing that I saw when I was out there was heat and how people responded to the heat. So it's not just like you need to drink a lot, or it's also how do you pace yourself for 206 miles in 100-degree heat? How deep do you go? And then also, is that going to change how you're going to fuel? Like, one of my friends was having issues and she was throwing up a lot when she was out on course because of the heat. So there's all sorts of different variables that come into play. And I think that caught off a lot of people, as well as the wind. That's also another thing that I think caught people off guard. So yeah.
We're speaking of wind, were you aero bar or no aero bar?
I was no aero bar.
Okay. Coming from a time trial specialist.
Yeah, that's different. I think granted, I didn't see the big beef oftentimes around aero bars is just people's ability to ride the aero bars in a pack dynamic. I did not see anybody in the aero bars in a true pack. It was usually in groups of like smaller groups. So I don't necessarily think that is a huge factor. The reason I did not use them is because I spent no time getting used to them. My training volume was pretty low, and I definitely didn't spend any time in clip-on bars. And so I didn't want to throw into that variable as well. So, but yeah, they are faster. I ended the day with 2 guys that had clip-on bars, and they throttled me the entire time because I did not have them. So it was interesting, and I understand them, and they do make a big difference in the right environment.
I think that also probably goes to just how you approach the race, and
totally,
like how you want to experience it. Like,
yeah. And it was, I think like that was another thing that was very blatantly obvious, which is such a cool part of the race, is that you have, as I mentioned a million times, all walks of life there, but that also shows like you have people that are super cutthroat about it and are like wanting to do their very best and pass anyone that's near them. You have others that are just out there to enjoy it and talk and hang out in the streams and cruise. And it's a pretty cool variety in there. And I was, more on the laid back front, but you could see it in people's eyes when they're a little bit more like, I want to get this kind of thing. So that's cool.
Right. Yeah. How aggro they are.
Yeah.
I think I am inspired maybe to try to do the hangout in the stream crossings and talk to more people. I think that would be fun.
Yeah. It's in this race, for example, it's a very interesting thing that I was kind of toying with, because it's kind of like, well, if you go really hard, you finish faster, assuming you don't blow up. But on the flip side, if you take it easy, you can kind of just like enjoy it and hang out, but it takes you, considerably more time at the same time. So the contrast.
Yeah. So it's like, it's just up for everyone out there to, pick your goals and, enjoy it in your own way.
Yeah. And you can there are ways of, I think people have it in their mind that you have to have like a ton of training volume to be able to do something like this. And I think you just have to have really focused training volume. My volume was the lowest it's ever been by a lot. My CTL was half of what it was 2 years ago, less. So it doesn't take this crazy amount. You just have to kind of like curve your expectations and realize where that'll lead you and what that'll take you to as a result. But you can still have a pretty rad day out of it. This was definitely very hard, but it's, that's part of the course.
Yeah. I think that's a really important point, because a lot of athletes think they need to train like as more than they ever have before in order to complete the longest race they ever have. Right. And I think if you're an experienced cyclist or you've been doing it for any length of time, what you're saying is maybe, slow it down, enjoy the ride more, not try to go as fast and, have the best performance per se, but you still got to dig in and get to the line. But you can probably still do it on maybe if you've had if you're just, more busy as you get older.
Yeah. Yeah. It was like, for example, 10 miles or so after the first aid station, there was people stopped on the side of the road, laying down in the shade. And I was like asking them how they're doing. And they're like, oh, I'm just, I'm kind of cracked. Like I'm feeling a little cracked. And they that's 80 miles into a 206-mile race. So I think that is an example of maybe like not listening to what you need to be doing. And that's something that, if you are going in with a little bit of a targeted training, like it's kind of capped and you don't have just endless matches to burn, then you just have to be smart about it. And that's how you kind of like make the best of your day.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like don't race the first 100 miles and expect to finish the next 100 feeling all right. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Exactly.
Well, I think that's an important thing. I mean, like I'm looking at your power file now, and for everyone out there, Isaiah kept it in check. I mean, let's just, the first 3 hours you wrote it at 0.71 IF. That's 70%. That's an easy zone 2, for only a 3-hour ride, but you had what, 11 more hours of, time on the bike. So it's a much different beast out there. It's basically like, can you ride zone 2 literally all day?
Yeah, basically I actually didn't look at my power all day.
Mm-hmm.
One, because I'm an altitude athlete coming down to sea level. And that I wanted my govern to be my sensation, not the meter. And I trust myself just because I've been doing this a long time to kind of like limit myself. And because of that, I was able to kind of just settle in and just keep myself pretty comfortable. So I never got to the point where I was really like breathing super deep. And that was kind of how I kind of controlled myself and kept it in zone 2. And like, sure, it was like a decent amount of tempo time and so forth. Like, but in, retrospect, it was only an hour and a half in tempo for me, 30 minutes in threshold and, 20 minutes above threshold. And then the rest of the time was a basically like split of zone 1 and zone 2. So it was really just kind of cruising at that steady state that I knew I needed to be at. So
true endurance test.
Yeah. The turtle. The turtle.
The tortoise.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Speaking of which, that's an interesting story. That was
you rescued a turtle?
Okay, no, but I almost did. I almost stopped and rescued one. I almost ran it over, first of all. It was one of the few sections that I was in a pace line, and we all just like barely dodged it.
Yeah.
There is a crap ton of cows out there. Go figure. It's Kansas. But they looked like they were quite entertained by what we were doing with ourselves. Good amount of hawks, good amount of just like birds and wildlife. It was just, you were just out there. Like there was everything to think about and look at for sure.
You remind me of, I've heard stories about the folks that do the 350 XL that have to ride through the night. And I've heard stories about the fireflies that they see in the middle of the night, and like swarms of them. And
that would be so cool.
Yeah, that would be so cool. And you don't know, the story, like they're so tired that, is it a mirage or is it real type thing?
Would be cool.
Well, thanks so much for sharing your epic day with us all. And maybe after everything is cooled down, we'll ask you if you'll go back next year.
I as I stand now, that's a firm no, but we'll see how things change. That's always the trap.
Time heals all wounds.
Yeah, right.
Not that you're wounded, but the same. Yeah.
Right. No, I get it.
Yeah.
Nice.
Well, thanks again, Isaiah.
Sure,
and
my pleasure.
Pleasure speaking with you. Everyone, you can read more about Isaiah over on our website. And if you have any questions for him, hit him up on his Instagram or in our forum or anywhere else Isaiah hangs out. Oh, and Isaiah, also, maybe, do you think you'll podcast more about the Unbound on your own podcast, the Training Edge podcast?
I think I will. I think I'll run through it. I'd like to grab some other athletes that did it too, and just kind of go through the memories and stories from the race. It's kind of like hard not to have some pretty flamboyant stories when you're out there. I definitely have a few that we didn't touch on. So I'm definitely going to jump on that soon.
Cool. Well, get some recovery, and everyone check out Training Edge podcast, right?
Yep, that's right.
Cool. Well, thanks again for being here, and we'll see you soon.
Thanks, Frank.
Thank you.